The scent of lilies and fresh linen always reminds me of that day, that perfect, agonizingly beautiful day that shattered my life into a million irreparable pieces. My name is Sarah, and I was once a woman who believed in happily ever after, in the goodness of family and the quiet promises whispered between lovers. I was 32, vibrant, and utterly, foolishly in love. My world revolved around Liam, my fiance, a man with a laugh that could make me forget every worry, and eyes that held the promise of a future I desperately craved. We were in Portland, Oregon, a city that had embraced me with its quirky charm and endless rain, a stark contrast to the sun-drenched, stifling quiet of the small town where I'd grown up. My parents had passed away just a year prior, a double blow that had left me reeling but also strangely resolute. They had left me a substantial inheritance, enough to buy the charming little bungalow we'd been eyeing, enough to start the flower shop I'd always dreamed of, enough to finally breathe. The papers were set to be signed, the funds transferred just a week after the wedding. A new beginning, literally. Liam's sister Bethany had swooped into our lives shortly after the engagement. She was a whirlwind of designer clothes, impeccable manners, and a smile that seemed perpetually plastered on her face. At first I was charmed. She offered to help with wedding plans, insisting on handling the floral arrangements and the catering, claiming she had connections. Liam adored her, his only sibling, and I wanted to embrace her as my own sister. "She's just enthusiastic," Liam would say when I'd mention her slightly overwhelming presence, her tendency to take over even the smallest decisions. "She means well," but beneath the polished veneer I started to notice things. A subtle shift in her eyes when I talked about the inheritance, a fleeting grimace when Liam mentioned my flower shop dreams. She'd subtly undermine my choices, suggesting her own ideas were more refined, or better suited for a couple of your stature. She'd insist on handling all communication with vendors, forwarding me emails that seemed carefully curated, never quite giving me direct contact information. It was small, insidious, and easy to dismiss as sisterly overprotectiveness, especially with Liam's unwavering defense of her. He truly believed she was just trying to help, perhaps a little overzealously. As the wedding day approached, the air grew thick with anticipation and a strange, creeping dread. I'd been working with my lawyer to finalize the inheritance transfer, a process that had hit a few unexpected snags. Documents seemed to go missing from my file, emails would mysteriously disappear from my inbox, and the bank repeatedly claimed they hadn't received certain confirmations. My lawyer, a stern but fair woman named Ms. Davies, was growing frustrated. "Sarah," she'd said just 2 days before the wedding, her voice tight with concern, "this is highly unusual. It's almost as if someone is deliberately obstructing this transfer." Tried to confide in Liam, my voice laced with anxiety, but he'd simply brushed it off. "It's just pre-wedding jitters, love," he'd murmured, pulling me into a comforting hug. "Paperwork is always a nightmare. Let's focus on us, on our day." His words, meant to soothe, only made me feel more alone, more adrift. How could he not see it? How could he be so blind to the insidious presence of his sister, who seemed to be everywhere, managing everything, smiling her perfect, chilling smile on the morning of the wedding? The air was crisp, the sky a hopeful canvas of pale blue. My bridesmaids buzzed around me in the bridal suite, a flurry of excitement and hairspray, but annoying unease sat in my stomach, refusing to budge. The inheritance documents, the last crucial piece of paper I needed to sign, were supposed to have been delivered to the venue that morning. My lawyer had assured me they would be. But when I asked Bethany, who was flitting about overseeing the final touches of the dacre, she simply waved a dismissive hand. "Oh darling, don't you worry about that today. It's your wedding. Everything's handled. I told the courier to leave them with the event planner. He'll make sure they're safe until after the ceremony." Her words were smooth, her smile unwavering, but a shiver ran down my spine. Bethany always took charge, always had an answer, too perfect. She had a way of turning every situation into a grand performance, always playing the hero, always in control. I finally slipped into my wedding dress, a cascade of ivory lace and silk, feeling like a stranger in my own skin. My heart hammered, not from excitement, but from a growing sense of foreboding. As I walked down the aisle, the hushed murmur of guests faded into a dull roar. Liam stood at the altar, his eyes shining with tears, and for a moment the unease lifted. He loved me. Surely he wouldn't let anyone hurt me. But then my gaze drifted to Bethany, standing gracefully in the front row, her eyes, usually so bright, glinting with something I couldn't quite decipher. A flicker of triumph, perhaps. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows and tearful promises. As we recessed hand in hand, a wave of relief washed over me. It was done. We were married. Maybe my fears were just that, fears. The reception was held in a beautifully renovated ballroom downtown. It was exquisite, every detail meticulously arranged. Bethany had truly outdone herself. As I mingled with guests, accepting congratulations, I found myself scanning the room, searching for the event planner. I needed to see those documents just to set my mind at ease. I spotted him near the main stage, a tall, slender man with astute, cynical eyes that seemed to take in everything without overtly reacting. He was talking to a catering manager, his voice low and calm. This was Elias Thorne, the wedding planner Bethany had insisted on hiring. I remembered her effusive praise for his discreet efficiency. Elias Thorne, age 32, based in Portland, Oregon. He was known for his seamless, almost invisible management of high-end events. He seemed to possess an almost unnerving ability to predict and prevent any mishap, and he carried himself with an air of detached observation, as if he viewed the entire human drama unfolding before him as a fascinating, if somewhat predictable, play. His career, spanning years of lavish weddings and exclusive parties, had evidently taught him to see through the veneer of societal expectations, revealing the raw, often messy, truths beneath. He was observant, perceptive, and utterly cynical, particularly when it came to displays of performative narcissism and family drama, of which he had witnessed countless examples. "Mr. Thorne," I approached him, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm Sarah. I was wondering if you received a package for me, some legal documents." He turned, his gaze sweeping over me, assessing, cataloging. There was no warmth in his eyes, but no malice either, just a quiet, knowing intelligence. "Mrs. Thorne," he corrected, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "Congratulations." He paused, then continued, his voice a smooth, even baritone. "Yes, a courier did deliver a sealed envelope for a Miss Sarah Miller this morning. I handed it directly to Miss Bethany Thorne. She specifically requested it, said it was urgent family business that shouldn't bother the bride on her special day." My blood ran cold. He had given it to Bethany. Sickening dread coiled in my gut. "Thank you," I managed, my voice a strained whisper. I turned away, the lilies suddenly smelling like a funeral. Later, as the dance floor buzzed and the champagne flowed, I cornered Bethany. She was laughing, radiant, surrounded by admirers. "Bethany," I said, my voice barely audible over the music. "The documents from Miss Davy. Elias said you took them." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes for a fleeting second hardened into chips of ice. "Oh, those, yes, darling. I have them, just put them somewhere safe. We can deal with all that boring paperwork tomorrow, can't we? Today is about celebrating." She squeezed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Her tone was dismissive, almost patronizing. "No," I insisted, a desperate urgency rising in my chest. "I need to see them now." "Where are they?" Bethany sighed, a perfectly theatrical sound of weary indulgence. "Honestly, Sarah, you're being utterly ridiculous. What is so urgent? It's your wedding day. Are you truly going to let paperwork ruin it? It's locked safely in my car, dear. We can discuss it in the morning." Her voice had risen slightly, drawing the attention of a few nearby guests, who looked at me with sympathetic, confused expressions. She was already framing me as the hysterical bride, my hands clenched into fists, hidden beneath the folds of my gown. "This is important, Bethany," I said, my voice dangerously low. "It's about my parents' inheritance." Her eyes widened, a look of feigned shock replacing her perfect smile. "Your inheritance? What on earth are you talking about? Your parents' estate was settled months ago, wasn't it? You received your portion ages ago, didn't you?" Her voice was laced with a chilling disbelief, as if I was the one making things up. "Liam, darling," she called out, turning to him as he approached, attracted by the sudden tension. "Sarah's talking nonsense about her inheritance again. She seems to think she's due more money." Liam's brows furrowed, a flicker of confusion then exasperation crossing his face. "Sarah, what is this? We've been over this. Your inheritance was transferred months ago. You know that. We even used some of it for the initial deposit on the house, remember?" He looked at me, his eyes clouded with what I could only describe as betrayal, my world tilted on its axis. "What are you saying, Liam?" My voice was a raw whisper, barely escaping my throat. "No, the bulk of it was supposed to transfer next week. We used a small portion for the deposit, yes, but the rest, my lawyer was still working on it. The final papers were for today." Bethany let out a theatrical gasp. "Oh, Sarah, my poor dear, she's truly lost it. Liam, you handle this. She's clearly distraught." She patted my arm, a condescending gesture, then slipped away into the crowd. Liam led me away from the dance floor, his grip firm, almost accusatory. "Sarah, stop this. Everyone's looking. Your inheritance was settled. It all came through months ago. You must have forgot." His voice was gentle but laced with a firm finality that struck me colder than any ice. "Bethany and I helped you manage it, remember? We set up those new investment accounts for you. You just signed the papers without reading them thoroughly, love." The words hit me like a physical blow. The new investment accounts Bethany had pushed me into, insisting they were so much more advantageous for someone like you. The papers she had rushed me to sign, saying, "Just initial here, darling, it's boilerplate, nothing to worry about." The complete control she had taken over my finances in the past few months, supposedly to help me organize everything after my parents' deaths. It all clicked into place, a horrifying, sickening realization. You did this." I choked out, staring at Liam, tears blurring my vision. "You let her do this to me?" His face hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about, Sarah. I helped you. We both helped you. It was all legal, above board." He let go of my arm, his eyes now cold and distant. "Perhaps you've had a little too much to drink. You're not making sense." My heart shattered, pieces falling to the floor of that beautiful, fake ballroom. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust, about love, about the very foundation of my life being ripped out from under me by the two people I had trusted most. It was betrayal on a scale I couldn't comprehend. I stood there in my white wedding dress, feeling utterly exposed, utterly destroyed. The dream, the flower shop, the bungalow, the future with Liam, all of it dissolved into a cruel, mocking mirage. Elias Thorne, from his vantage point near the bar, watched the scene unfold. I caught his eye, and for a brief moment I saw not just professional detachment, but a flicker of something else, pity, understanding. He simply raised a hand, making a slight, almost imperceptible gesture, a tiny tilt of his head towards Bethany, who was now across the room, laughing a little too loudly. It was a subtle, cynical validation of my instincts, a confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that her performance was indeed just that, a performance. He had seen it all before, countless times. The predatory family member, the naive target, the carefully orchestrated deception. I wanted to scream, to rage, to tear apart the beautiful facade, but I couldn't. I was frozen, hollowed out. The tears finally came, hot and silent, streaming down my face. My wedding day, the day I lost everything. As Liam turned away, retreating into the crowd, leaving me alone in the center of the room, a new emotion began to bloom in the ashes of my despair. Not just sorrow, but a cold, hard anger. A desperate, burning need for justice. They thought they had won. They thought they had gotten away with it. They were wrong. This was not the end. This was just the beginning of a different story, one written in shadows and fueled by fire that would never ever go out. If you're enjoying this story of betrayal and the thirst for retribution, remember to subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. The next few months were a blur of unimaginable pain and stark, brutal reality. I had been left with nothing, not even a savings account. Liam, my newlywed husband, vanished, sending a curt email a week later claiming I was unstable and he was seeking an annulment. Bethany, of course, was listed as a character reference, her testimony undoubtedly painting me as a delusional, grasping bride. The house, the dream flower shop, everything was gone. The inheritance, my parents' legacy, had been siphoned off through a series of complex, seemingly legitimate investment schemes that Bethany had carefully crafted. My signature was on every document, thanks to her charming reassurances and my own devastating naivete. It was all legal, a perfectly executed, elaborate con. I found myself sleeping on a friend's couch, then later in a tiny, dilapidated studio apartment in a forgotten corner of Portland, miles from the vibrant downtown where my dreams had been so cruelly crushed. I took on odd jobs, waiting tables, cleaning houses, anything to survive. The humiliation was a constant companion, a heavy cloak I wore everywhere. Every casual glance felt like an accusation, every whispered conversation a reminder of my spectacular downfall. I imagined Bethany and Liam laughing, enjoying the spoils of their betrayal, living the life that should have been mine. That image was the only thing that kept me from crumbling completely. It fueled a quiet, steady rage, a burning ember deep within my soul. My lawyer, Ms. Davies, had tried to help, but her hands were tied. Sarah, she'd explained, her voice heavy with regret during one of our final meetings. Bethany structured this impeccably. Your signatures are legitimate. The investment companies are real, albeit shady. She exploited your trust, yes, but legally it's a closed case. You signed off on everything. The only way to fight this would be to prove undue influence or fraud on a level that would be incredibly difficult, and financially you're not in a position to pursue it. I was trapped, buried under a mountain of legal jargon and a mountain of debt. Despair was a black hole, always threatening to swallow me whole. There were days I couldn't get out of bed, days I just stared at the peeling paint on my ceiling, wondering how I could have been so blind, so stupid. The memories of my parents, their laughter, their hard work, their endless love now felt tainted. Their legacy gone. It was like they had died twice, but then a flicker. A memory of Elias Thorne's cynical gaze, his knowing tilt of the head. He had seen it. He hadn't known the full extent, but he had seen Bethany's performance for what it was. It was a tiny seed of validation, a reminder that my instincts weren't entirely wrong, that I hadn't been completely insane. It was enough. I started small. During my breaks from cleaning houses, I would haunt the local library. I devoured books on financial law, corporate fraud, psychology, and even the art of manipulation. I learned about shell corporations, asset protection, and the loopholes that people like Bethany exploited. I studied their tactics, their vulnerabilities. I learned about human nature, about how greed could warp even the closest bonds. I read about people who had lost everything and rebuilt, not just their lives, but their power. I started observing Bethany from a distance. She was everywhere, or so it seemed. Her name appeared in society columns, at charity events, always pictured with Liam by her side, living in the beautiful house that was once destined to be ours. She invested in new businesses, flaunted expensive cars, and took lavish vacations. Each sighting was a fresh stab of pain, but also a renewed surge of determination. She had climbed over me to get there, and I would make sure her perch was precarious. My transformation was slow, painful, but absolute. The naive, trusting Sarah died that day in the ballroom. A harder, more cynical woman emerged, one driven by a singular purpose, to reclaim what was stolen from her and to make Bethany and Liam pay. I learned to mask my emotions, to speak with a calm detachment, to observe without being seen. I cut my hair, changed my wardrobe, even practiced my posture and gait, molding myself into someone unrecognizable, someone capable of achieving what I needed to achieve. I started building a network cautiously, strategically. I sought out other victims of financial fraud, people who had been conned and were eager for justice. I found a brilliant, retired forensic accountant who had a soft spot for the wronged and a fierce hatred for white-collar criminals. He saw the fire in my eyes, the methodical way I presented my case, and agreed to mentor me pro bono. He taught me how to trace money, how to find the cracks in seemingly ironclad legal structures, how to use information as a weapon. My life became a carefully constructed chessboard. Every move was calculated, every conversation a potential advantage. I was patient. I knew revenge was a dish best served cold, and I was prepared to let it chill in the freezer for years if that's what it took. Bethany and Liam had grown comfortable in their ill-gotten gains. They believed they were untouchable. That was their biggest mistake. They never looked over their shoulders. There were moments of despair, deep, soul-crushing moments where the enormity of my task seemed insurmountable. I was just one woman, pitted against a web of deceit and powerful connections. I was constantly battling the urge to simply give up, to wallow in my misery. But then I'd remember the look on Liam's face, the smug triumph in Bethany's eyes, the cold emptiness of my bank account, and the fire would reignite. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice. It was about proving that even the most carefully crafted lies could be unraveled. And if you're finding yourself caught up in this intricate web of retribution, remember to subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. The years passed. Bethany and Liam continued to thrive, their empire seemingly growing. She had launched a successful chain of boutique event planning businesses, ironically, capitalizing on her perceived knack for organizing lavish affairs. He had moved up the corporate ladder, his charming facade making him a popular, if somewhat superficial, figure in the Portland business community. They hosted extravagant parties, their faces plastered across local social media, symbols of success and happiness. To the world, they were the perfect couple, the benevolent sister-in-law and the loving husband. To me, they were a constant, burning reminder of everything I had lost. I had meticulously prepared. My legal knowledge was extensive, my understanding of financial forensics sharp. My network, painstakingly built over years, included disaffected former employees of Bethany's company, disillusioned clients who had seen glimpses of her ruthless nature, and even a few of the very couriers and minor contractors she had used to facilitate her initial fraud. Each piece of information was a thread, and I was weaving a noose. My plan was intricate, multi-layered, and designed to strip them of not just their wealth, but their carefully constructed reputations, their social standing, and ultimately their freedom. It would begin subtly, with a series of whispers, carefully placed doubts, and then escalate into a public, undeniable expose. The first phase began with a whisper campaign. Bethany's event planning business, Gilded Gala, relied heavily on word of mouth and her pristine reputation. I subtly planted negative reviews online, not outright accusations, but thinly veiled criticisms of her cut corners, questionable ethics, and disregard for client privacy. I used burner accounts, of course, and varied the language to make it seem like genuine customer complaints. Simultaneously, I leveraged my network of disgruntled former employees. They were all too eager to share stories of Bethany's petty tyrannies, her financial improprieties, and her tendency to take credit for others' work. These stories, carefully leaked to niche gossip blogs and then to larger, more reputable local news outlets, began to chip away at her polished image. Next, I targeted Liam. He was ascending in his corporate role, aiming for a vice presidency. His reputation was his currency. I had discovered through meticulous research that he had been systematically inflating his expense reports for years, a habit Bethany had encouraged, calling it smart business practice. The sums were not enough to warrant immediate termination, but enough to raise flags and initiate an internal audit. I anonymously provided his company's HR department with irrefutable, untraceable proof. The forensic accountant had helped me create a digital trail that led straight to Liam, but with no trace back to me. The microhooks were everywhere now. Bethany's client list started to dwindle slightly. Liam's promotion was suddenly put on hold. Small ripples, but enough to cause them unease. They were feeling the pressure, but they didn't know where it was coming from. They probably blamed each other or external factors. Good. The crescendo of my plan revolved around a grand charity gala that Bethany was organizing, her magnum opus. It was her opportunity to cement her reputation, to showcase Gilded Gala as the premier event company in Portland. Every prominent figure in the city would be there, including investors, politicians, and the local media. It was the perfect stage for their downfall. Had secured a highly sought-after media pass, posing as a freelance reporter for a small, online lifestyle magazine. My appearance was radically different from the grieving bride of years past. I was sleek, professional, and utterly unreadable. I practiced my voice, my mannerisms, ensuring no one would recognize the woman they had so casually destroyed. On the night of the gala, the ballroom shimmered with gold and crystal. Bethany, in a dazzling gown, moved through the crowd, radiating confidence, the picture of success. Liam was by her side, still handsome, still smiling, but I could detect a faint tension in his jaw, a slight nervousness in his eyes. My subtle pressure points were working. My plan involved a digital Trojan horse. I had painstakingly created a comprehensive file containing every piece of evidence I had gathered. The original manipulated inheritance documents, email exchanges where Bethany detailed her schemes to various complicit parties, recordings of phone calls where she openly discussed her financial improprieties, unknowingly taped by a disgruntled former assistant I had befriended, bank statements showing the illicit transfers, Liam's falsified expense reports, and testimonials from clients she had defrauded. It was all encrypted, time-locked, and ready to be unleashed. I positioned myself near the projection screen, ostensibly covering the event for my magazine. The main event of the evening was a presentation showcasing the charity's mission, followed by a live auction. Bethany was scheduled to give a speech, a highlight reel of her company's philanthropic efforts. As the lights dimmed and Bethany approached the podium, clutching her speech notes, a familiar figure slipped into the room, seemingly unnoticed by the throngs of people. It was Elias Thorne. He moved with the same detached grace, his eyes scanning the room, perhaps looking for any logistical mishaps. He hadn't been invited by Bethany, of course. She preferred to control her own narrative now. He must have been a guest, or perhaps attending another event in the same building. His presence was a stark, almost poetic reminder of that fateful wedding day. He noticed me, our eyes meeting across the crowded room. I saw a flicker of recognition, a slight widening of his observant eyes, but no overt reaction. He simply nodded, a subtle acknowledgement, then turned his gaze back to the stage, settling into his usual role as an astute, cynical spectator. Bethany began her speech, her voice smooth and confident, painting a picture of selfless dedication and impeccable integrity. Her words were a sickening echo of her past deceptions. This was my moment. With a discreet flick of my wrist, I activated a small, cleverly disguised device wirelessly connected to the main projection system. It bypassed the gala's security, a backdoor I'd spent months creating. Instead of the charity's heartwarming video, the massive screen behind Bethany suddenly flickered to life, displaying a series of slides. The first slide was a magnified image of my wedding invitation, pristine and elegant. Then it dissolved into a blurred image of my parents' faces, then a sharp, clear image of their death certificates. The room stirred, a low murmur rippling through the crowd. Bethany paused, a frown creasing her forehead, thinking it was a technical glitch. The next slide showed a complex diagram, arrows moving from Sarah Miller Estate to a series of shell corporations, eventually landing in accounts linked directly to Bethany Thorne and Liam Thorne. Below it, in stark white text, flashed the words, "The inheritance, a perfectly legal theft." A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. Bethany's face went white. She stammered, trying to speak, but no words came out. Liam, sitting in the front row, half rose from his seat, his eyes wide with horror. The slides continued, relentless, each one a fresh hammer blow. Emails, bank statements, recorded conversations, all meticulously cross-referenced, all presented with irrefutable clarity. The details of Liam's inflated expense reports, the names of the clients Bethany had defrauded, the lies she had spun to her employees, it was all there, laid bare for everyone to see. The elegant ballroom, moments ago filled with laughter and light, was now a tomb of whispers and shock. A hushed voice from the crowd, someone who recognized me from years ago, gasped, "It's Sarah Miller." The whispers intensified, spreading like wildfire. Bethany tried to regain control, rushing towards the screen, desperate to shut it down. But the system was locked, overriding her commands. Panic was etched on her face, replacing her carefully cultivated composure. The performance was over. "This is a lie, a fabrication," she shrieked, her voice cracking, her perfect facade crumbling. "This woman is unstable. She's mentally ill." Just then my voice, calm and clear, amplified by a hidden microphone, cut through the chaos. "No, Bethany," I said, stepping forward, letting my face be seen, letting them recognize me. "This is the truth you buried, the truth you stole, the truth you thought would never see the light of day." I recounted the betrayal, the intricate web of deceit, my destitution, the years of struggle. I spoke not with anger, but with a quiet, devastating, factual precision that was far more potent than any outburst. I watched as the faces of the city's elite shifted from shock to disgust, from confusion to understanding. Their perfect socialite, their successful businessman were exposed as ruthless con artists. Liam, meanwhile, had slumped back into his chair, his face pale, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. The legal team from his company, present at the gala, was already huddling, their eyes fixed on the screen, their expressions grim. Bethany's clients, many of whom were in the room, were openly furious. The police arrived shortly after, having been tipped off anonymously about a major financial fraud expose at the gala. With the evidence displayed so publicly, so irrefutably, they had no choice but to act. Bethany, screaming, protesting her innocence, was led away in handcuffs. Liam, silent and shattered, was taken in for questioning by his company's security team, his career and reputation irrevocably destroyed. Elias Thorne, still standing near the bar, watched the entire spectacle unfold. He didn't smile, he didn't react, but when our eyes met again, there was a fleeting, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement, a silent communion between two people who had seen the truth. He had been a cynical observer that day in the wedding ballroom, and he was a cynical observer now, but perhaps, just perhaps, there was a hint of grim satisfaction in his gaze. He had seen the performance, and now he had seen the curtain fall. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. My meticulously gathered evidence was undeniable. Bethany was charged with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. Liam, though not directly charged in my case, was fired from his job, facing his own internal investigations for financial impropriety, and eventually his once glowing reputation was in tatters. He vanished from the public eye, presumably to rebuild his life somewhere far away, but he would forever be marked by the scandal. I watched it all not with joy but with a strange, bittersweet sense of vindication. I had achieved what I set out to do. I had reclaimed my narrative, exposed their lies, and ensured they paid a price. But the years of struggle, the emotional cost, the person I had become, it was a heavy burden. The innocent, trusting Sarah was gone, replaced by a survivor, a strategist. I had justice, yes, but not happiness in the way I once understood it. The lilies would forever carry a faint, metallic scent of betrayal. I didn't rebuild my flower shop. Instead, I used the skills I had painstakingly acquired to become a consultant, helping others who had been victims of similar financial crimes. I became a voice for the voiceless, a protector of the vulnerable. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was a life forged from strength, resilience, and a profound understanding of human nature. My name was Sarah, and I was a survivor. My story was a testament to the fact that even in the deepest despair, a seed of revenge could grow into an unyielding force for justice. The quiet promise I made to myself on that devastating wedding day had finally been fulfilled, and that, in itself, was a victory. Remember to subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily.